Hey everyone. So I already tried doing this once, but then I started sneezing and I got weird and cluttered and clunky. So we'll try it again. I'm back from breakfast with family and took care of the animals for a little while. This is Sophia. She wanted to sit in my lap, so she says hi, and she's marking her scent on my desk. She's a big cat, but I rescued her from my old apartment. She's really sweet. So I'm just getting the screen sharing pulled back up. Oops, stop share again. Yeah, that's why it's the reason I wanted to redo the recording is because I shared the wrong thing. I don't know why it's doing that. Maybe I did. Last time I did. All right. Sorry. Distracted. Um, this is the exam sheet. You don't have, this isn't posted on the website. It's not posted on Canvas or Blackboard, whatever the LMS is for your university. You won't see this until you take the exam, and you may not see it in this format depending on whether your class is asynchronous or in person. Um, I actually haven't had a chance to get inside the learning management system and set up the exam for asynchronous. But again, that will be video recorded video. You need to have access to a webcam, and you'll use Response Lockdown browser, and you'll have 45 minutes to write um, a thorough essay with probably an introduction paragraph and a conclusion paragraph, and then as you can see from here, 3 pages of the primary argument, which is it should you. I mean, you're basically writing a 5 page essay, um, double-spaced essay, 5 to 7 pages in that 45 minutes, right? It's not short. Um, I think my online students are going to struggle from not having the physical book in front of them to see how much I'm expecting them to write. But I think each page was like 20 lines, so 60 lines in the body, and another 20 from the conclusion and introduction. Okay, Sophia got it down, so let's pull it back up. Um, this is the exact same. You won't, like I said, you won't always have access to the prompts, but this prompt is in the guiding questions. So we're going to go over there. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we won't talk about this moving forward. I'm also going to go ahead and close this extra essay on Bergson that I linked in the guiding questions right here. Because I'm done with it, and I've mentioned it, and we're done with it. And so if you want to read it, you can read it, but I want to clean up. Um, okay. So I was thinking based on what I've told you kind of already about what Bergson was about and what the Introduction to Metaphysics is about, that some of these questions really should make sense, or they should start to be questions you can try to answer. Like, I think if you didn't know the things I was talking about, you wouldn't be able to do anything with these. But now you can at least start to. And then when we read the text, it'll make sense. So we've probably been going for like 3 to 5 minutes by now. Um, so I will wrap around. Uh, anyway, y'all can't see what time it is, but maybe in like 42 minutes. What is it like to experience the intuition of concrete duration, including the memory of one's own concrete duration as well as the concrete durations of others? How do we harmonize with our own concrete duration? How do we listen in order to augment and to dilate ourselves and our imaginations to others' concrete durations and to their lived perspectives? Which is clearer to the mind, intuition, or analysis? How are elements different from parts? Reference the argument about psychological studies isolating a specific element of consciousness. We talked about elements and parts in relation to Spinoza's nature and in relation to a ball moving through the air. The ball expresses the whole movement of the line at every position it passes. Bergson, I think, says you can't even say that it passes through the points. It's just that the points are there whenever you mistakenly believe that things are static when they're not. It's not a position, but a supposition, meaning an assumption. It is a posture that the mind takes towards the world, a supposition. Um, Not a position, not stuck in space, it's moving. How am I connected to others through the intuition of concrete duration? Cool. Why does motion come before stasis? A curve before a point. So these are kind of like the key ones, and these are if you're still stuck, check these out. Um, a curve before a point, an integral before a differentiation. If you need to look some of these words up, you can, but integral and differentiation are mathematical terms. So I believe acceleration is the integral of speed, and speed is the integral of position. That sounds right. Um, in other words, when you have so differentiation and integrals and integration, um, in a sense, add dimensionality to mathematics. From a single point, you can integrate to a line, or from a line, you can differentiate into points. From a curved line, like a parabola, but you can differentiate into, I guess, depending on what you differentiate by and how you differentiate, I think you can take it to different lines. I think it can become different lines. Um, but maybe not. Maybe it becomes one specific line. But I think there's like standard differentiation and then like specific modulations on differentiations. Um, See, integration is different is interesting because Bergson says that you can only go from intuition to analysis. You can't go from analysis to intuition. So you can't go from the pieces and the sketches back to the whole you can't go from the positions to the line. You can't go from the lines to the curve. Um, so how do you integrate? Right? That's the question. Immanence is one solution. The idea that the integral comes first and then you differentiate from the integral. Um, that is in fact the phenomenological solution for eidetic intuition. So that all seems to jive. Um, Again, in Sartre, psychology doesn't reference the mind. It talks about the mind without taking advantage of the mind's access to itself, is how Sartre puts it. And so because it doesn't believe in that phenomenological method, it requires on external evidence and empirical observation and data and a secondary person and objectification, all of these things. It doesn't trust the knowingness of the mind. It's not really, I think it's the difference between open and closed sets. So an open set is an edge that contains like more than the closed set. The closed set has the wall and the open set is onto it. Um, Now the closed set is the one that's actually on the point though, but the open set is more expansive. Just thinking about like intuition versus analysis. self-referential comprehensive eidetic structures versus um, granular, isolated, compartmentalized eidetic structures. Anyway, what is the significance of the analogy of the artist in Paris sketching the Tower of Notre Dame? That'll help with elements versus parts. Um, Bergson talks about how if you've never been to Paris, then the sketch is only a sketch. If you've been there, though, it evokes your memory of being there and all of the other details the sketch doesn't capture. I think this metaphor, this image also want to walk back, I think. Yeah, I argue that the sketch of the Tower of Notre Dame also helps us conceptualize and understand the ways in which elements and parts become expressed and communicated despite the limitations of analysis and intuition, right? Anytime I say something, I'm translating an intuition into an analysis. And so you're only ever getting what you can get from a communication. I have experience in perception. Every eye has experience in perception. And if we've traveled similar roads and had similar experiences, then what I communicate to you will resonate and you'll understand it. If I spell out a map to you of how to do something and how to get somewhere, and you've done that before and you've gone there before, that map is very easy to follow. It doesn't matter if I draw it out or say it or demonstrate it. Now, if I demonstrate it, I walk you through the steps, I go there with you. Well, then we're actively constructing the intuition together because we're constructing the experience and the perception together. But for the most part, if I try to use words or drawings or models or things like that, then I'm only able to communicate to you what resonates, what lands with what you already know, but maybe didn't articulate in specific, complex phrasing. Actually developing the intuition is more difficult and can't be done with concepts according to Bergson, but can be done um, with images partially and with intuition directly, if I can get you to go to your own intuition. So he talks about the images kind of creating this tension where all of the different metaphors and images he's using are insufficient to communicate what he wants to communicate. And they keep refining each other. But by creating a sufficiently broad council or committee or system of images that all pull on each other in different directions, no one image is capable of overpowering the others. And so no one image replaces the intuition that all of the images are meant to summon together. He says that almost verbatim. We'll get there. We'll read it. Um, but when he says things like that, he's helping us understand the ways that we can communicate, the way that intuition works, the way we understand truth. Um, and again, the reason I present this material at the beginning of this class is because I don't think you can, I think you could, I think many people do philosophy as analysis and think that by labeling and categorizing things, they are understanding them or learning. Plato's cave is a good example of this critique because Plato says that if you were stuck in the cave with the shadows, um, you would wouldn't you see the prisoners having competitions about who could label the shadows best and predict which puppet will come next after this puppet most accurately and most consistently? I digress. Between which two extremes does metaphysics operate? We said this, rationalism and empiricism, unity and multiplicity. Bergson says this explicitly. So you know when you just like do something and you go to the place you wanted to go? Well, that's the place I wanted to go. Between these two extremes limits moves intuition, and this movement is metaphysics itself. That is on page right? The concretion of alteration. Um, so concrete duration is not the ticking of the clock. That's like a C. If you write that, you will get a C, if not a D. Let me say that again. The universal ticking of a clock in space on a like that atomized mechanical precision is analysis. That is not concrete duration. Concrete refers to concretion. Concretion is a sort of, well, accretion is a cycling coalescence or a coalescing process which solidifies things. So if we look at an accretion disk, it is a ring of matter around a black hole. Um, or accretion as a process means a gradual accumulation of additional layers of matter. And concretion as a process means it's the accumulation of matter in geography. Bergson uses it in terms of quality. So Bergson wants to put quality before quantity, wants to put experience before structure and mathematics and extension. Yeah, and he wants to put conscious perception first, right? So for Bergson, concrete duration is the idea that the qualitative experiences of the different qualitative properties, if they are different qualitative properties, come first and they persist in an organized way, which produces the quantitative properties. The enduringness, the duration produces the quantitativeness, the quantitativity. So this is not a container wherein green, pink are held. These are phenomena of green and pink that form the shape of a container because the phenomena endure in that space and thus create the space itself. The phenomena comes first. That is concrete duration. I'm just hoping I don't have to write a C on anybody's paper. I got worked up about that because I had answers like that. I may have had a few of those in the blue book exams. I can't remember. I think I did. They did get C's. Um, those were students who, like, for whatever reason, were coming to class the first few weeks, and so they took the exam and weren't really like locked in with me as their teacher. Um, they fixed it real quick, but they thought like Google would get them the answers. No, like I know what I'm talking about, and it's not there. Um, but more so, I had it happen when this was a daily work questions. This assignment used to be daily work. It used to be just like the first few days, and then there was a multiple choice midterm. Um, and students, a lot of students, more so got that one wrong because the stakes were so low. They weren't as careful about there. Fewer of them were careful about getting it right. I'm not even sure what Google will tell you. Just don't use it. Use the text, the primary source. Stick to this. That's why I go to such links, the annotations, the guiding questions, this video. Go to such links to make the text itself accessible. All right. Um, what is the significance of the analogy of orange as one shade emits many in a manifold? One shade on a fluid and notchless continuum between shades across the visible light spectrum. So we're still kind of jumping ahead. We're going to read this all the way through, but at least because it's on the same page. So where he says that the uh, the metaphysics moves between the two extremes of unity and multiplicity. That's page 158 in my annotations copy. On that same page further up is where he talks about orange. And he just says basically that if if you were orange, you might think that orange has an experience of orangeness, and it does. And orange orange's experience of orangeness might only, in a naive way, think that only orange existed. But it could see if it zoomed out, and it can feel that the orange is on a sort of fuzzy continuum, bleeding, edging out, phasing with the boundaries of red and yellow and other shades and gradients of red and yellow. And so Bergson very explicitly uses this metaphor to communicate the way in which we share the intuition of concrete duration. The interiority of the soul and my consciousness that I can experience through the intuition of concrete duration is the same interiority that all matter has and that all life has. And so this is why Bergson argues, right, that evolution is something more spiritual, something more mental than just biological survival. And it goes very well with somebody like Spinoza, who says that mind and matter are the same thing, that the mind and matter of the whole world together all at once is God. Um, Bergson, in fact, says at the very end that the intuition or the listening involves a spiritual auscultation, where auscultation means attentive listening or effortful listening. And listening is something that does not have to be purely auditory. Listening can be visual. Listening can be tactile. You can listen to your body. You can, um, yeah, I mean, little perturbations or reverberations, like if you're driving a car and it starts acting up, quote unquote, you're listening to the tactile sensitivities. You're paying effortful attention and discerning information from that effortful attention, right? Um, and this goes well with Dewey too, who says that aesthetic perception requires aesthetic creation, meaning that the perceiver has to recreate the work and imagine what the artist went through in making it. Um, Including like a cook, a chef. So somebody who is maybe a chef themselves or is a food critic has more of a mental experience while they're eating, or at least is better able to differentiate the different flavors in what they're eating. And not only that, but they can differentiate the different flavors and have a meaningfully distinct or meaningfully enriched um, phenomenological experience, right? More rich than somebody who's not as experienced in distinguishing multiple complex flavors in their palate at once. The person who's reading this text for the first time cannot see all at once all the different things that I'm talking about. It's probably might be a little bit to keep up with. Um, but with facility, it becomes incredibly rich. So the he calls them an aesthete. So this is Dewey again, an artist experience. He just says that if you know that there's some rarity involved in the or some difficulty involved in the production process, then you're better able to appreciate a work of art or a piece of food. And so perception requires some kind of mental making. Just thinking about listening. Okay. Um, so that's the questions. Those are the guiding questions. Those are some answers to the guiding questions. Most of that is in the text itself. Um, you are still expected to work through the entire text with me, even though I've mostly covered everything that's in it. Um, and so let's get through that. Or again, take a character whose adventures make up the subject of a novel. The novelist may multiply traits of character, make his hero speak and act as much as he likes. All this has not the same value as the simple and indivisible feeling I should experience if I were to coincide for a single moment with the personage himself. The actions, gestures, and words would then appear to flow naturally, as though from their source. They would no longer be accidents making up the idea I had of the character, constantly enriching this idea without ever succeeding and completing it. The character would be given to me all at once, in its entirety, in the 1,001 incidents which make it manifest, instead of adding to the idea and enriching it, would, on the contrary, seem to me to fall away from it without in any way exhausting or impoverishing its essence. I get a different point of view regarding the person with every added detail I am given. All the traits which describe it to me, yet which can only enable me to know it by comparisons with persons or things I already know, are signs by which it is more or less symbolically expressed. Symbols and points of view then place me outside it. They give me only what it has in common with others and what does not belong properly to it. That's right. If I say that something is green, I have here 5 gum, and these are both green. They're different shades of green. Insofar as they are green, they are neither this green nor this green. I'm telling you what they are not. They are not either of these things. Every category becomes a vacuous communication because it is a generalization. They give me only what it has in common with others, has that green in common with others, and what does not belong properly to it. But what is properly itself, what constitutes its essence, cannot be perceived from without, being internal by definition, nor be expressed by symbols, being incommensurable with everything else. You can't make up the change. Description, history, and analysis in this case leave me in the relative. Only by coinciding with the person itself would I possess the absolute. It is in this sense, and in this sense alone, that absolute is synonymous with perfection. Though all the photographs of a city, taken from all possible points of view, indefinitely complete one another, they will never equal in value that dimensional object, the city along whose streets one walks. So all the analyses as photographs versus the intuition as the experience of actually walking the streets. All the translations of a poem in all possible languages may add nuance to nuance, and by a kind of mutual retouching, by correcting one another, may give an increasingly faithful picture of the poem they translate, yet they will never give the inner meaning of the original. A representation taken from a certain point of view, a translation made with certain symbols, still remain imperfect in comparison with the object whose picture has been taken or which the symbols seek to express. But the absolute is perfect in that it is perfectly what it is. It is probably for the same reason that the absolute and the infinite are often taken as identical. If I wish to explain to someone who does not know Greek the simple impression that a line of Homer leaves upon me, I shall give the translation of the line, then comment on my translation, then I shall develop my commentary, and from explanation to explanation I shall get closer to what I wish to express, but I shall never quite reach it. When you lift your arm, you accomplish a movement, the simple perception of which you have inwardly. But outwardly for me, the person who sees it, your arm passes through one point, then another, through another, and between these 2 points there will be still other points, so that if I begin to count them, the operation will continue indefinitely. Seen from within, an absolute is then a simple thing, but considered from without, that is to say, relative to something else, it becomes with relation to those signs which express it, the piece of gold for which one can never make up the change. Now, what lends itself at the same time to an indivisible apprehension and to an inexhaustible enumeration is, by definition, an infinite. It follows that an absolute can only be given in an intuition, while all the rest has to do with analysis. We call intuition here the sympathy by which one is transported into the interior of an object in order to coincide with what there is unique and consequently inexpressible in it. Analysis, on the contrary, is the operation which reduces the object to elements already known, that is, common to that object and to others. Analyzing then consists in expressing a thing in terms of what it is not, or in terms of what is not it. All analysis is thus a translation, a development into symbols, a representation taken from successive points of view, from which are noted a corresponding number of contacts or touches between the new object under consideration and others believed to be already known. But they're just touches, they're not the object themselves, they're not the full absolute of the thing. In its eternally unsatisfied desire to embrace the object around which it is condemned to turn, analysis multiplies endlessly the points of view in order to complete the ever incomplete representation, varies interminably the symbols with the hope of perfecting the always imperfect translation. It is analysis ad infinitum. But intuition, if it is possible, is a simple act. This being granted, it would be easy to see that for positive science, analysis is its habitual function. So Bergson, there's a bird on the hopping on the fence. Um, Bergson isn't exclusively critical of analysis. He thinks that analysis has its place in the sciences and with goal-oriented thinking, daily life. But he thinks that if you seek certain things through analysis, you'll never get them. Certain things that only intuition can give. He also thinks that intuition is the way to make the sciences work together. So intuition can be a point that from which you can descend to the different sciences and all their schools that separate and argue with each other. Um, so yeah, it would be easy to see that for science, for positive science, analysis is its habitual function. It works above all with symbols, even those concrete of the sciences of nature, the sciences of life, confine themselves to the visible form of living beings, their organs, their anatomical elements. They compare these forms with one another, reduce the more complex to the more simple. In fact, they study the functioning of life in what is, so to speak, its visual symbol. That's a tough one, right? What is a visual symbol? How expansive is Bergson's understanding of analysis if perception, visual perception, um, struggles to access intuition? If there exists a means of possessing a reality absolutely instead of knowing it relatively, of placing oneself within it instead of adopting points of view toward it, of having the intuition of it instead of making the analysis of it, in short, of grasping it over and above all expression, translation, or symbolical representation. So grasping, is there a grasping, an eidetic grasping, um, a certainty, a commitment, a conviction, the mindness of the truth? If there is one of those things, metaphysics is that very means. Metaphysics is therefore the science which claims to dispense with symbols. I think this puts metaphysics very close to phenomenology. We often find that these different schools have more in common than the hairs they split, which I think Bergson agrees with. I'm just not sure if like Marx and Sartre and Deleuze would agree with phenomenology. Well, would agree with Bergson being so open. I don't know. Um, Deleuze would agree with Bergson, but Deleuze wouldn't agree with phenomenology, I don't think. And Sartre would agree with Marx, but that kind of critiques him a bit. Deleuze critiques Marx. So, but I see more in common than I do with the hair splitting. I think we got like 10 minutes left. So this is where Bergson is going to point us to ourselves to find a universal experience of intuition that every person can access for themselves. And just jumping ahead, well, I'm not going to go show it to you, but at one point he says, to the person who cannot find this themselves, nothing can be helped. We can try to point you, we can try to show you, we can give you the images. Um, we'll get to the exact language he uses later. All right. There's at least one reality which we all seize from within by intuition and not by simple analysis. It is our own person and it's flowing through time, the self which endures. With no other thing can we sympathize intellectually or, if you like, spiritually. But one thing is sure, we sympathize with ourselves. I like that he says the self which endures, because the enduring of consciousness really speaks to what I'm talking about the enduring of qualities. So just if you just meditate and watch your mind for a bit, you'll remember things, you'll imagine things, you'll experience things. Close your eyes. You might have a song stuck in your head. I get songs stuck in my head all the time. What is that imagining space, right? I'm actually working on a book. I'm reading Ed Casey was a mentor of mine. I'm reading his book Imagining right now because we're going to do an interview in a few months. And yeah, it's cool to think about like what is the mental space where that happens. Plato talked about it, but not much. Well, Plato talked about it. The divided line mentions imagining as the first stage, but try to have some qualitative mental experiences. I don't know how much people have going on up there all the time other than me. I don't have access to that, so I don't. But see what you can observe. And I think that watching that will get you to a place where you can see, because that's the intuition of concrete duration for yourself. Now, if you can like go back to your birth and kind of wrap up your whole life, like, yep, that's my life. I've got that. I can grasp the memory of my life all at once. That's Justin. That's Professor Hill. Um, and I can also zoom into my 10th birthday where my dad made fajitas and my Nana let me drive her old white Tahoe in the back field so I can get some practice in. Um, and in my head, what I'm saying in those things, I can kind of see some visual imprint of that experience. It's affected me, it's there. So that's historical materialism again, that's Spinoza. But it's also, and that's impression and Dewey. But it's the self which endures too. I mean, some of the actions I take now are impacted by those experiences I've been through in the way that I was affected. Um, but again, the container doesn't come first. The qualitative phenomena endures, and where there is stability in the phenomena, that stability is taken as quantitative law. But the law is qualitative and cannot be quantified or legislated and written out. Um, just thinking, this is a debate whether reality is objectively mathematical or not. Um, in Bergson's position is that it's not. In my position is that it's not. Descartes' position, according to most people, is that it is. I read Descartes as a phenomenologist. And then there are other analytic philosophers who debate this in other ways, and I don't follow that discourse at all. I do like Mental Events by Donald Davidson. In that essay, Davidson explains that there are laws between the causation of mind and matter that are consistent, but they don't necessarily, but just because they're consistent doesn't mean that they are interpretable to the human mind or transcribable or translatable. You could not codify them necessarily. And the codification or our perception or the language of them or understanding of them is not the way that they function as qualities. And I think this makes sense with Bergson. I think this makes sense with a lot of philosophers. Um, okay. With no other thing than the self which endures can we sympathize intellectually, or if you like, spiritually. The one thing is sure, we sympathize with ourselves. When, with the inner regard of my consciousness, I examine my person in its passivity, like some superficial encrustment, first I perceive all the perceptions which come to it from the material world. These perceptions are clear-cut, distinct, juxtaposed, or mutually juxtaposable, so contrasted or set apart. They seek to group themselves into objects. Like I said, the perceptions, the qualities endure into quantitative consistency. Next, I perceive memories more or less adherent to these perceptions and which serve to interpret them. These memories are, so to speak, as if detached from the depth of my person and drawn to the periphery by perceptions resembling them. They are fastened on me without being absolutely myself. You do have to get to the core of who I am, who you are. And finally, I become aware of tendencies, motor habits, a crowd of virtual actions. We won't see this word virtual again until the end of the semester with Deleuze, or depending on what curriculum I'm running, what curriculum you have this class in. Phil 1301, it's the end of the semester with Deleuze. Phil 1304, it's a few weeks later. A crowd of virtual meaning not actualized yet. They could be taken, they could be not be taken. They're possibilities to take. And finally, I become aware of tendencies, motor habits, a crowd of virtual actions more or less solidly bound to those perceptions and these memories. All these elements, with their well-defined forms, appear to me to be all the more distinct from myself, the more they are distinct from one another. Turned outwards from within, together they constitute the surface of a sphere, which tends to expand and lose itself in the external world. But if I pull myself in from the periphery toward the center, if I seek deep down within me what is the most uniformly, the most constantly and durably myself, I find something altogether different. What I find beneath these clear-cut crystals in this superficial congelation is a continuity of flow comparable to no other flowing I have ever seen. It is a succession of states, each one of which announces what follows and contains what precedes. Strictly speaking, they do not constitute multiple states until I have already got behind them and turn around to observe their trail. While I was experiencing them, they were so solidly organized, so profoundly animated with a common life, that I could never have said where any one of them finished or the next one began. In reality, none of them do begin or end. They all dovetail into one another. So I was surprised in the past how many of my students didn't know what dovetail meant. So you can see that the notch here, if you can imagine, like, yeah, this is a better one. It has to be cut in a very unique way. Um, and technically it can still slide out one direction, but it can't slide out the other direction. Um, so it's good for drawers, for example, right? Because you're going to be pulling drawers in the direction where it can't slide out back and forth. Um, but the piece that formed it, you don't need nails to form it. So just this kind of like interlacing, the interwovenness, is what Bergson has in mind about the moment to moment experiencing. I talk to my students are in class with me, I say like, so and so. What did you do before this, before coming to class today? Oh, I went to a different class. Oh, I had breakfast. Oh, did you come from your dorm? Did you walk? Did you drive? Oh, I drove. Oh, I walked across campus. Um, and it was like, and this is very different from that, right? You're in a very different room now than you were 2 hours ago, right? You're like, yeah, but it continued. It was seamless. It was fluid. Uh, there's a unity there in the way that it continues. And there's a fundamental transformation of the world that you're moving through and that you're experiencing, or your phenomena of it, in that your world is so different. Your environment is so different. The one you're bound up with and attached to is so different. Um, your room is so different. Bergson calls this qualitative heterogeneity as well. Um, he doesn't call it that here. I believe that's in Time and Free Will. Um, but the heterogeneity means that there is a distinction, there is a multiplicity, there is a diversity, there is difference, but that difference happens in quality itself. So again, how do you go from happy to sad? How do you have fundamentally different emotions on a continuous experience? Breakfast is hitting. I'm becoming dehydrated and getting burpy. Sorry. Um, okay. That should help me feel better in a second. I taste salty to it. Maybe it's Celsius. Okay. Oh, we're right at time. So I don't have, oh, Winchester's right here. I don't know if he wants to be subjected to the dog tags again. But we're at the 45-minute mark. We'll call it for this video. Um, sorry about awkwardly like needing to drink some water at the end. Um, yeah, qualitative heterogeneity. How is consciousness all the things that it is? How is life all the wild things that it is? How is everything so different and continuous and the same? Unity and multiplicity, same and difference. And just real quick, we can't say unity and multiplicity because that's unity, right? That makes one thing out of the two. We can't say unity or multiplicity because that makes two things out of the one. That's why Bergson says that you need the dialectic back and forth between the two because both are inadequate for the qualitative heterogeneity. Um, rationalism doesn't get the whole picture. So, and even like rationalism, for example, it thinks that everything can be deduced from principles and you don't need experience. You'll need to know this in a few pages, in a couple, like 20 pages, 10, 20 pages. And but Descartes, for example, uses experience to justify his positions. He says he has a phenomenological experience justifier. He says that there's a clarity and distinctness to the truths. And he would not be able to trust this clarity and distinctness if it ever proved false, if you ever experienced it and then something was shown to be false. That is an empirical set of experiences which are corroborating and forming the base of Descartes' phenomenological justifier of the natural light and clarity and distinctness. And so Descartes' rationalism is not pure rationalism, it has some empirical components. Likewise, like John Locke, for example, John Locke is shown that he needs some kind of unifying concept to bring together all the multiplicity of perceptions. And so both have components of each other. Um, now we have something far more fluid where people are kind of programmed and deprogrammed. The mind is elastic. It's inscribed by affect. It's impressed by experience. That experience from my past and my history allows me to understand this and explain it to you. I like that's what skills are. I practice something as a skill. My body carries that skill, that affect, that capacity, that power. Actually, affect does mean all those things. Affect is the ability to affect and be affected in Spinoza's definition. Um, well, it's affecting and being affected as well as the ability to affect and be affected. So it's the actual impacting that's happening, that's always happening, the ongoing process, but also the way that those processes augment the tendencies and possible futures of all the objects. Um, their abilities to affect and be affected. Um, so affect covers, for example, affect captures not only your experience right now of us together. Now there's some delay because this is recorded and you're having an experience with me. I'm not getting feedback from you, although I am posturing my mind as if I'm talking to a you. So some phenomenologists would even say like, this is getting extra long at the end. Some phenomenologists would even say like there's this distinct modality of the mind for you-ness versus I-ness. Um, and I'm doing that, but you're having more of an affective dynamic. Anyway, to explain affect in the final instance, you're not only being affected by me, you're not only like having the present, but that present is impacted by your past, and each student will get a different experience connecting with me, which is why me reading Bergson to you is able to bring something different out of it as well, because I'm able to see things and then present the whole kind of intuition of that intuition. So by reading Bergson to you, my affective history and the wisdom of my life combines with the affective history and the wisdom of Bergson's life to communicate and pass on whatever to you can be taught. So yeah, qualitative heterogeneity, unity and multiplicity, rationalism and empiricism, affect, intuition, getting into it. I promise you this is a deep end, right? We've gone into the deep end at first, and it only gets easier from here. So just stick with it, keep going, and 90% of my students make A's. I've had over 270 so far. So I hope you have fun. I know I'm trying to encourage you to stick with it, but I hope I don't have to, you know? Um, one student, I loved this. This made me really happy. He said, I never thought of it like this. He said, yes, you mandate things for us, you make us stick to it when we wouldn't choose to, but we very quickly get into it. So, or he didn't say it like that. What he said was, he had a hard time phrasing it, but I said it again for him, and he said, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. And what he was trying to say is that the things I mandate in class, it's very dense, it's difficult, but I mandate those things and I give you the resources and it will click at some point. And he appreciated that the scaffolds with the mandate forced him to stick to it long enough to develop the sparks of friction of his organic interest. Um, and I thought that was so cool, right? Like this is something I love. I love philosophy. I love these ideas, and it's taken me a while to get to where I can understand them and talk about them well. And I want to share that with you guys because I think it's interesting, because I think it leads to a good life, and because I think it leads to a good community where you can help them take care of other people. Um, And I really respect people's freedom. And so I hadn't thought about like it's only for a little bit that that mandate is happening, right? Very quickly it becomes organic. We're just following along and interested in flowing. So I we're kind of long today at 55 minutes. I'm gonna cut it here. I don't think I'm gonna jump into the next one just yet. I think I might go take, well, yeah, I need to run the animals to the vet clinic. They're gonna get shots. It's cheap right now. $50 per animal for the round, so it's a lot cheaper than others. Anyway, should be title cards here, and see you guys soon. Thanks for sticking this out. Thanks for if you're a student, I appreciate you. I look forward to grading your work. I hope you find this empowering and useful. And if you are just finding me on YouTube, then I'm grateful that you're here. Leave comments in the bottom, questions. Um, yeah, I've got a full semester of this stuff to get out, so plenty more to come. Winchester, oh, get up here. Come on. No, well, come on. He's getting older. Come on. He's just being lazy. All right, bye guys.